a man lived alone and was still a virgin at 40, until a native woman asked to take shelter in his barn during the storm. Dust and small stones rolled across the dry ground like tiny rivers, and the sky was a swirl of gray clouds, heavy with the promise of a storm. Inside the barn, a man named Joran worked quietly, hammering a loose beam into place. He had lived alone on this distant world for nearly 40 years, far from the few scattered human settlements that existed across the planet. Joran was not a man born for loneliness, but life had made him this way. He had been sent to Alurin 7 decades ago as part of a small exploration team. A tragedy had struck the group early on. A crash landing had killed most of his companions, leaving him as the sole survivor. Over time, he learned to survive on his own. He built shelters, dug wells, grew strange alien crops, and even tamed a few of the native creatures that roamed the hills. Despite his solitary life, Joran had found a rhythm. Every day was predictable, and that predictability gave him peace. He woke with the dim glow of Alurin's 7 twin suns, checked the energy generators that powered his small barn, fed his animals, and worked on inventions that might make life easier. He had a small collection of tools, metal scraps, and spare parts scavenged from the remains of his old team's ship. He had built machines that could purify water from the planet's scarce streams, and a small solar collector that provided enough energy to keep him warm in the cold nights. As he hammered the last nail into the beam, a sudden gust of wind rattled the barn doors. Joran paused, listening to the roar of the approaching storm. Storms on Alurin 7 were dangerous. They came without warning, strong enough to tear through metal and wood. Joran had learned the hard way to respect them. He looked out through a small window. The clouds were thickening fast, and the wind had picked up. Dust and small stones hit the glass, and he could see lightning flashing far in the distance. The air smelled of ozone and wet soil, a sign that the storm carried heavy rain. He knew he had only a few hours to make the barn secure. Joran went to work quickly, tying down loose metal sheets and reinforcing the old wooden walls. He moved with careful precision, knowing that one mistake could cost him dearly. As he worked, he thought about the quiet life he had built. He had no neighbors, no visitors, and no distractions. Just him, the barn, and the hills that stretched endlessly into the horizon. It was peaceful, yes, but sometimes he felt the sharp edge of loneliness. He missed the sound of other voices, the laughter of companions, and even the simple comfort of someone sharing a meal. But those thoughts were fleeting. He pushed them aside as he checked the generator and adjusted the sensors on his weather monitor. Technology was his companion, and it had kept him alive for decades. He had become skilled at reading the land, the sky, and the behavior of the native animals. He could predict rainfall, locate safe drinking water, and avoid the dangerous predators that roamed at night. Humans had survived on Alurin 7 for only a few years, but Joran had adapted to it fully, using his intelligence, ingenuity, and careful planning. As the storm drew closer, the wind became almost unbearable. The barn groaned under the pressure, and Joran held onto the wooden beam to keep his balance. Suddenly, he noticed a small figure moving in the distance. At first, he thought it was one of the native animals, but then he realized it was something else, someone walking through the harsh wind, struggling to reach the barn. Joran frowned. Visitors were rare. No one traveled these hills during storms unless it was an emergency. He grabbed a lantern and carefully opened the barn door, bracing himself against the wind. A figure appeared through the swirling dust, a woman, wrapped in thick furs, her face partially hidden by a hood. She stumbled toward the barn, her movements clumsy against the gale. Joran immediately recognized that she was a native of the planet. Her features were sharp, her eyes bright and observant, and her clothes were designed to survive the planet's harsh climate. He called out, "You shouldn't be out here. Come inside quickly." The woman looked relieved. She hurried to the door and slipped inside the barn, shaking off the dust and water from her clothes. Her eyes scanned the barn, curious and cautious. She was not from the nearby human settlements. She carried no weapons, only a small satchel and the scars of someone who had survived in a dangerous world. Joran set down the lantern and examined her more closely. "You're a native," he said. "How did you end up out here in this storm?" She nodded, catching her breath. "I was traveling," she said, her voice calm but firm. "The storm came too fast. I needed shelter." Joran studied her for a moment. Humans were unpredictable and strangers could be dangerous, but he could see no threat in her posture or expression. She had the look of someone who had survived through skill and intelligence, much like himself. He nodded. "Then you're welcome to stay here until the storm passes, but you'll need to follow my rules while you're inside." She smiled faintly. "I understand." For the next few hours, the storm battered the barn. Rain pounded against the metal roof, and wind rattled the walls as if trying to tear them apart. Inside, Joran worked quietly, checking the animals and making sure the food stores were safe. The woman sat near the fire he had started, warming herself and watching him work. She did not speak much, but her presence was comforting. Joran realized that for the first time in many years, he was not completely alone. As night fell, the storm's intensity began to decrease, though the wind still howled. Joran finally sat down on a wooden crate, exhausted but satisfied. The woman moved closer to the fire, her eyes reflecting its orange glow. "You've built a strong shelter," she said quietly. "Most humans would not survive here as long as you have." Joran smiled faintly. "I've had a lot of time to learn." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the storm's dying rage outside. The barn smelled of wood, metal, and the faint scent of animals. It was simple, but it was safe. A small world that Joran had mastered. The presence of another person stirred something in him he had not felt in years. Not loneliness exactly, but the reminder that humans were meant to connect, to share knowledge and experience, even in the harshest conditions. He realized that survival was not just about strength or skill, it was also about trust and cooperation. He watched the woman closely. She seemed resourceful, intelligent, and unafraid of the challenges the planet presented. Perhaps, he thought, she could teach him something just as he could teach her. Humans had survived in hostile worlds not just because of their strength, but because of their ability to adapt, to learn, and to work together. As the night deepened, the storm finally passed. The clouds began to part, and the first faint stars of Aluran 7 shone through the sky. The barn was quiet except for the soft crackling of the fire and the distant calls of nocturnal creatures. Joran looked at the woman and nodded. "We survived the storm," he said. She nodded back, her eyes reflecting both relief and curiosity. "Yes," she said. "And perhaps there is more to survive together than just weather." For the first time in decades, Joran felt a spark of something new. It was not fear and it was not loneliness. It was hope, a recognition that humans could endure anything, not just by themselves, but together. And as the night stretched on, two humans, strangers to each other, yet bound by the challenges of this harsh world, sat quietly, learning that even in isolation, connection could be found. Morning came slowly on Aluran 7. The sky was a pale gray, streaked with the soft gold of the twin suns. The storm had passed, leaving behind a wet, earthy smell and puddles that reflected the rolling hills. Joran stepped outside the barn, stretching his arms and feeling the chill of the early day. The ground was muddy, and small streams had formed where the rainwater had carved its path. The woman who had sought shelter the night before was already awake, sitting on a crate near the barn's entrance. Her fur-lined clothes were damp, but she seemed unharmed. She watched Joran carefully, as if assessing whether he was a threat or a friend. "You need to eat," Joran said, breaking the silence. He went to a small storage shelf and pulled out dried rations and some fresh water he had collected. "It's safe to drink," he added. She accepted the food with a nod and began eating quietly. Joran observed her while he prepared his own breakfast. She moved with grace, her hands efficient and precise, even in these simple tasks. There was something in her demeanor, quiet confidence and alertness, that reminded him of himself. She was used to surviving in a world that did not forgive mistakes. After breakfast, Joran decided it was time to speak. "Who are you? And why were you traveling in the storm?" he asked. She swallowed her last bite and looked at him. "My name is Lyra. I come from the northern highlands. I was searching for an old supply outpost when the storm hit. I could not see far enough to continue, so I sought shelter." Joran nodded. "The northern highlands are dangerous, especially during storms. Few humans or natives travel there during the season. Why did you risk it?" Lyra's eyes glinted with determination. "Sometimes risk is necessary. I needed supplies. Some of my people are sick and I could not wait for the next trade caravan. Life here demands action, even when it is dangerous." Joran studied her carefully. Her words carried truth. Humans on Aluran 7 had survived not because the world was easy, but because they were brave, clever, and willing to face danger head-on. He felt a strange respect for her. "You could have stayed outside," he said finally, "and risked the storm killing you. But you didn't. You used your mind and your instincts. That is how humans survive here." Lyra nodded, as if understanding that he had noticed her strength. "And you," she said, "have survived alone for many years. That is no small feat either." Joran looked at the barn he had built, at the machines he had repaired, at the fences he had mended after the storm. It had been a lifetime of careful work, ingenuity, and patience. Humans could endure alone, yes, but they could also thrive when they used their intelligence and adapted to the land. "You stay here," he said, "and you will see how humans endure. You will see how we turn danger into advantage." The next hours were filled with work. Joran decided to show Lyra some of the small machines he had built. He led her to a corner of the barn where a collection of devices hummed quietly, powered by solar panels and small water turbines. "This," he said, pointing to a device with spinning gears and metal tubes, "filters water from the streams. The streams may carry bacteria, parasites, and other dangers. Humans cannot afford to drink unsafe water." Lyra examined it closely, nodding. "Ingenious. You have used parts from old ships and broken machines." "Yes, nothing goes to waste here," Joran said. "Every scrap can be used. Every failure teaches a lesson." She smiled faintly. "That is very human, to learn from mistakes, to adapt and overcome." The conversation paused as a loud rumble shook the barn. Joran looked outside. The storm had passed, but the clouds still hung low, heavy with moisture. Far off in the distance, lightning sparked, and he could see dark shapes moving in the hills, native creatures, large and cautious, drawn out by the recent rain. "They are harmless if you respect them," Joran said, more to himself than to her. "But hunger and fear make them dangerous." Lyra nodded, observing the creatures. "I have faced many of them before. Humans have survived by learning the land and understanding these creatures. I see that you have done the same." For the next few hours they worked together. Joran showed her how he reinforced the barn walls, stored water safely, and even cultivated a small garden of alien plants that could survive the planet's harsh soil. Lyra shared knowledge of the northern highlands, where to find safe routes, how to recognize weather changes, and which native animals were dangerous. By mid-afternoon, Joran realized that he was learning as much from her as she was from him. Humans, he thought, were remarkable not just for surviving individually, but for sharing knowledge, for building on each other's experience. That was the strength of the species. As the sun began to dip behind the hills, Lyra paused and looked at Joran. "There is something you should see," she said. "The storm may have revealed it." Curious, Joran followed her outside. The ground nearby was wet and churned as if something had been unearthed. Lyra pointed to a partially buried metal structure, old and weathered, with strange symbols etched on it. Joran knelt and brushed away the mud. "I did not build this," he said, examining the markings. "This is ancient, maybe from the first expeditions or something older." Lyra nodded. "Perhaps. The storm may have uncovered more than just mud. The planet holds secrets, and humans are clever enough to find them." Joran felt a thrill of excitement he had not experienced in years. For decades he had lived a routine life, survival, maintenance, and invention. But now, with another human present, the world felt bigger, more alive. There were mysteries to solve, challenges to face, and opportunities to test human ingenuity. The sun finally set, painting the sky with deep oranges and purples. The barn glowed warmly from the lanterns inside. Joran and Lyra returned, bringing samples of the strange structure with them. They examined it carefully, noting symbols, strange alloys, and signs that it had once held energy or water. "This could be useful," Joran said. "Humans have survived because we can turn old things into new solutions. Perhaps this will help us survive even better." Lyra nodded. "Yes, humans endure not just because of strength but because of curiosity, intelligence, and cooperation. Alone we survive. Together we thrive." As night fell, they worked quietly, repairing the barn, examining their findings, and sharing stories of survival. Joran realized that the presence of another human brought new energy, new perspective, and a reminder that even on a harsh world like Aluran 7, humans were capable of remarkable things. By the end of the day, the barn felt less lonely. The machines hummed softly, the fire crackled, and the humans sat together, planning, learning, and sharing. The storm had passed, but the adventure had only just begun. And as Joran looked at Lyra, he understood something he had forgotten long ago. Humans were strongest not in isolation, but in connection, in teaching, learning, and facing the unknown together. That was the true power of humanity, clever, adaptable, and unyielding, even in the face of a planet that seemed determined to challenge them. The night was calm, the air cool and fresh, and the stars above twinkled as if acknowledging the quiet triumph of human ingenuity. And in that small barn on the edge of a wild world, two humans, strangers just a day before, sat ready to face whatever mysteries and dangers the next day would bring. The morning air was sharp and clean after the storm, but the land bore its scars. Small streams had overflowed, washing away loose soil and leaving deep ruts across the hills. Trees that had survived the storm creaked under the lingering wind, and the once flat plains now had pools of water that shimmered in the light of the twin suns. Joran stepped outside the barn and scanned the landscape. He had faced storms before, but this one had been stronger than most. The barn had held, thanks to his careful reinforcement the night before, but the surrounding land was damaged. Alien plants he had nurtured were flattened, and some of the fences he had built for the small herd of creatures he kept had collapsed. Lyra appeared at his side, her furs still damp but her expression alert. She had already begun walking toward the damaged fields, inspecting the soil and the fallen plants. "This storm was stronger than normal," she said, her voice calm, but with an edge of urgency. "The northern highlands have been hit harder." "Your barn survived, but your land has been affected," Joran nodded. "Yes, I will need to repair the fences, rebuild the garden, and make sure the water systems are clear. The storm taught me one thing: nature is clever, but humans are cleverer." Lyra smiled faintly at his words. "I agree, but cleverness alone is not enough. You must act quickly. The creatures need food, and the water must not stagnate. If you delay, everything you have worked for could be lost." Together, they moved through the wet, uneven terrain, repairing the damage. Joran showed Lyra the irrigation channels he had built, which diverted rainwater to small reservoirs for the crops and animals. A fallen tree blocked part of the channel, and they worked together to remove it, using levers and ropes to shift the heavy trunk. As they worked, Joran noticed something unusual. The mud near the barn seemed disturbed in patterns that were not natural, tracks perhaps of some creature, but far larger than any native animal he had seen. He frowned. "Do you see this?" he asked, pointing at the tracks. Lyra knelt and examined them carefully. "Yes, these are not from animals. They look like machinery tracks, but old, abandoned." Joran's heart quickened. On Aluran 7, abandoned machinery often meant remnants of previous expeditions. Sometimes they held valuable resources, but they could also be dangerous if they were damaged or contained unstable energy sources. "We should investigate," Lyra said, already moving toward the tracks. Joran followed, keeping a careful eye on the horizon. The storm had uncovered more than just muddy fields. As they moved closer, the tracks led to a partially buried structure, metallic and weathered, half hidden by mud and fallen branches. Joran crouched and brushed away the debris. "This is old," he said, "very old. Possibly from the first human expeditions here, or from something before us." Lyra ran her hands over the strange symbols etched into the metal. "I have seen markings like these in the northern highlands," she said. "They belong to the ancient ones, intelligent, long gone, but they left traces of their technology everywhere. Humans rarely find them intact." Joran felt a thrill of excitement. Humans were survivors, but they were also explorers. Every discovery was a chance to learn, to use intelligence to turn the unknown into an advantage. He could feel the spark of curiosity, the same spark that had driven humans to colonize harsh worlds like Aluran 7. They worked together to uncover more of the structure. It was a small chamber, with walls of a strange alloy that gleamed faintly despite decades of exposure. Inside, remnants of devices, wires and tubes were scattered across the floor. Some parts looked broken while others seemed intact, as if waiting for someone clever enough to bring them back to life. "Careful," Joran warned. "We don't know what any of this does. Some of these old machines can store energy or worse, release it dangerously." Lyra nodded. "We will be careful, but humans survive by understanding and experimenting. That is how we adapt." Joran smiled faintly. She was right. The human advantage was not strength or speed, but the ability to think, plan, and adapt. Alone, a person could survive. Together, they could solve problems that seemed impossible. They began examining the devices, taking careful notes and separating what could be reused from what was clearly damaged. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, warming the wet ground and drying some of the mud. Birds began to return and small creatures cautiously emerged from the hills. Suddenly, a sharp noise echoed from the hills behind them, a metallic clanging, unnatural and deliberate. Joran and Lyra froze, scanning the horizon. A group of scavenger drones left over from previous human expeditions was approaching. Their metal bodies were rusted, but their sensors still worked. They were drawn to movement, and now they had detected the two humans. "Stay calm," Joran whispered. "We can outsmart them." Humans have always survived against machines by thinking faster than they act. Lyra nodded. Together, they moved quickly. Joran directed her to help drag some of the larger objects from the ancient chamber, creating a small barricade between themselves and the approaching drones. The drones advanced, their metal legs clanking against the wet ground. Joran studied them carefully. Their movement patterns were predictable. They were programmed to explore, to follow heat signatures, to collect materials. They were dangerous but not clever. Humans had something machines could never match: adaptability. Joran picked up a small mirror from the debris and positioned it to reflect sunlight toward the drone's sensors. One drone paused, its metal body tilting as it registered the sudden flash. Another followed, and soon the drones were disoriented, unable to continue their approach. "Quick," Joran said. "We can use the trench we dug earlier. It will slow them down if they try to get closer." Together, they moved toward the shallow trench that had been carved by the storm's runoff. They lured the drones into the muddy water where the machine's legs became stuck. With careful planning, they pushed debris over the machines, trapping them temporarily. Lyra watched with admiration. "Humans are clever," she said. "We survive by thinking, not by brute force." Joran smiled faintly. "Exactly. Adaptability is our greatest weapon." Once the immediate danger had passed, they returned to the ancient structure. The discovery had given them a new goal: to learn from this technology to see if it could be repaired or repurposed. But the storm's aftermath and the scavenger drones had also reminded them that survival on Aluran 7 required constant vigilance. As the sun began to set, they returned to the barn with a small collection of recovered devices and notes. The fire was lit again, and the warmth was a welcome comfort after a long day. "Today," Joran said, "we saw what humans are capable of. Alone, we survive. Together, we can face storms, creatures, and even machines left behind by those who came before us." Lyra nodded. "Yes. And tomorrow, we will continue. Humans do not give up. We use our intelligence, our curiosity, and our cooperation to overcome the challenges of the universe." The night fell calm, but Joran knew that Aluran 7 would never remain peaceful for long. The planet was wild, unpredictable, and full of secrets. But he also knew that humans had a power unlike any other: the ability to learn, to adapt, and to endure. And with another human at his side, he felt stronger than he had in decades. The barn was quiet except for the soft hum of machines and the crackling fire. Outside, the stars twinkled over a world that was harsh, dangerous, and full of possibilities. And inside, two humans, strangers who had only met a day before, sat ready to face whatever came next, confident in the strength of their minds, their ingenuity, and their ability to survive together. The dawn light spread across the hills of Aluran 7 in pale gold and silver. The aftermath of the storm left the land fresh and wet, but also full of challenges. Fallen trees and muddy streams made traveling difficult, and the once familiar landscape looked almost foreign. Joran stood outside the barn, examining the horizon, while Lyra inspected the scattered debris from their discovery yesterday. "The storm exposed more than I expected," Lyra said, kneeling beside a partially buried panel from the ancient structure. "It looks like there are more remnants of technology nearby, perhaps even a full facility." Joran's heart quickened. Humans had survived on Aluran 7 through ingenuity and careful adaptation, but the possibility of an intact alien facility was something else entirely. "We have to be careful," he said. "Old machines can be dangerous, but if we are careful, we can learn a lot. Humans survive by turning risks into opportunities." They prepared for the journey, gathering supplies, tools, and provisions. Joran double-checked the energy generators in the barn, while Lyra carried a small satchel of maps and notes she had taken from her previous travels. They moved cautiously through the hills, navigating the streams and pools left behind by the storm. Every step required attention. The mud could hide sharp rocks, and the wet ground could cause them to slip. After a few hours, they arrived at a site partially revealed by the storm. Unlike the small chamber they had uncovered the day before, this area seemed like the entrance to a larger complex. Panels of strange metal jutted from the ground, and cables ran along the surface, some still faintly glowing. Joran knelt and brushed away the mud, revealing markings etched into the walls. "These symbols, they are more than decorative," he said. "They must be instructions or warnings. The ancient ones were intelligent. Humans need to respect what they left behind." Lyra studied the markings. "Yes, they often built traps to protect their technology, but humans survive because we can understand, adapt, and overcome. Let's proceed carefully." Together, they entered the partially exposed structure. The interior was dim, lit only by cracks in the metal walls and faint glows from the remaining power sources. Joran examined the machinery. Some of it was damaged beyond repair, but other parts seemed intact, waiting for someone clever enough to activate them. "This is incredible," Lyra whispered. "These devices could help humans survive in ways we never imagined. Energy storage, water filtration, even atmospheric control, all of it here." Joran's mind raced. Humans had always survived in harsh environments by understanding and using their surroundings. This facility was a chance to do more than survive. It was a chance to thrive. But he knew that curiosity carried risk. One wrong step could trigger a trap or release dangerous energy. As they moved deeper into the complex, they noticed the faint hum of machinery starting to stir. It was as if the facility had been dormant, waiting for intelligent beings to awaken it. The lights flickered, and a holographic panel illuminated, displaying symbols and shapes neither Joran nor Lyra had seen before. "We need to analyze this carefully," Joran said. "Humans survive because we think before we act. Every detail could be important." Lyra nodded. "Agreed. We can divide tasks. I will inspect the control panels and mapping systems. You can examine the energy devices and see if they can be safely activated." Hours passed as they worked. Joran studied the energy devices, carefully testing circuits and examining conduits. Lyra decoded symbols and mapped out the structure, marking areas that seemed safe and areas that might be dangerous. Their cooperation highlighted human ingenuity, thinking creatively, dividing tasks, and combining knowledge to solve complex problems. Suddenly, a loud clanging echoed from deeper inside the facility. Joran froze. "Something else is here," he whispered. From the shadows emerged several scavenger drones, similar to the ones they had seen after the storm but more advanced. Rusted yet functional, they moved deliberately toward the humans. Their sensors glowed, scanning for heat and movement. "They're attracted to activity," Joran said quietly. "Humans survive by observing, planning, and using the environment to our advantage. Let's not panic." Lyra nodded. Together, they moved strategically through the corridors, using the complex's machinery as cover. Joran noticed an old storage unit with reflective panels. He positioned them to redirect light, temporarily blinding the drones. Lyra used cables from the walls to create obstacles, slowing their movement. The drones, despite their metal bodies and programmed logic, were predictable. Joran realized that humans survived not because they were stronger than machines, but because they could adapt faster than they could. He guided Lyra to a control panel, where they could shut down the facility's auxiliary power, which also deactivated the drones temporarily. "Humans think," Joran said. "Machines follow instructions. That is why we survive." With the immediate danger gone, they continued their exploration. The facility revealed storage rooms filled with supplies and devices. Some machines looked like atmospheric regulators, designed to purify air and water. Others contained tools and equipment that humans could repurpose for energy collection, farming, and communication. "This could change everything," Lyra said. "Humans could survive here long-term, even thrive. We could use this knowledge to build better shelters, produce food, and maintain safety, even in extreme conditions." Joran nodded. "Yes, but first we must secure it. Humans survive because we prepare for the unknown. Tomorrow we will move equipment back to the barn, repair what we can, and use our intelligence to turn these discoveries into tools for survival." They worked late into the day, cataloging what they found. The facility was massive, larger than anything they had expected. Every new room brought potential dangers, but also opportunities for humans to prove their ingenuity. Joran and Lyra moved carefully, testing each device and documenting what could be used safely. As night fell, they returned to the barn with some of the smaller, portable devices. The fire warmed their tired bodies, and the hum of their small machines provided comfort. Joran looked at Lyra. "Today we faced dangers, storms, machines, and unknown technology. Yet humans survived, and more than survived, we learned, adapted, and prepared for the future." Lyra nodded, her eyes reflecting both admiration and determination. Yes, humans endure because we are clever, adaptable, and cooperative. Alone, we survive. Together, we overcome challenges that seem impossible. The night was calm outside, but Joran knew that the facility held more secrets. The storm had revealed only part of it, and somewhere in the hills other dangers, natural or mechanical, might still lurk. But he felt confident. Humans had survived worse. Humans had built civilizations on barren worlds, outsmarted predators, and turned disaster into opportunity. And as they planned their next steps, mapping the facility, moving equipment, and exploring deeper, Joran realized something he had long forgotten. Humans were strongest not in isolation, but when they used their intelligence, shared knowledge, and worked together. The presence of Lyra had reminded him of that truth. Outside, the stars of Aluran 7 twinkled, distant yet constant, shining over a world full of challenges. Inside the barn, two humans, strangers turned allies, sat quietly, preparing for whatever the next day would bring. And in that quiet there was hope. The storm had passed, but the adventure and the test of human ingenuity was only beginning. Joran smiled faintly. Tomorrow we will see just how clever humans can be. Lyra's expression mirrored his. Yes. And we will survive, as humans always do. The barn was quiet again, but inside, the minds of two humans worked, learning, planning, and imagining the possibilities of a world that seemed impossible to tame. And that, Joran thought, was what made humans truly remarkable. The morning air was crisp, filled with the smell of wet earth and faint ozone from the previous storm. Joran and Lyra prepared for another day at the partially uncovered facility. The night had been quiet, but both knew that the structure still held secrets and possibly dangers. Yet their curiosity burned brighter than fear. Humans survived on Aluran 7 because they were clever, adaptable, and courageous. Joran checked the devices they had recovered yesterday. Some were simple energy collectors, others were tools to purify water and regulate temperature. He carefully packed them for transport to the barn, where they could experiment safely. Lyra carried notes and sketches, mapping the remaining sections of the facility. Together, they were methodical, precise, and patient, qualities that had kept humans alive for centuries. "This facility is bigger than I imagined," Lyra said, pointing to a series of tunnels partially buried in mud. "We may find more technology inside. Some of it might even be critical to human survival on this planet." Joran nodded. "We'll proceed carefully. Humans survive because we plan, adapt, and act wisely. Curiosity alone is not enough. Preparation is key." They moved through the tunnels cautiously. The walls were made of strange metal alloys, faintly warm under their touch. Some passages were blocked by debris, while others led to chambers filled with machinery. Most of it was old and rusted, but some components hummed faintly, as if waiting for intelligent beings to awaken them. In one chamber, they found a device unlike anything they had seen before. It was a tall structure with rotating panels and tubes that emitted a soft blue glow. Symbols ran along the edges, and a faint hum resonated through the floor. Joran carefully examined the device, taking notes. "This could be an atmospheric regulator," he said. "If we can restore power, it may help control air quality, temperature, and even humidity. For humans living here, that would be a huge advantage." Lyra studied the symbols. "We must decode the instructions before activating it. Ancient technology is clever, but humans survive because we understand what we are dealing with before acting." Together, they worked to decipher the symbols and reconnect the energy lines. Hours passed, filled with trial, error, and careful observation. When the device finally powered up, the chamber glowed softly. Air circulated smoothly, and temperature sensors indicated a comfortable climate. Joran and Lyra exchanged a glance, both understanding the magnitude of their success. Humans survive because we think ahead, adapt, and cooperate, Joran said. This device proves it. Alone, it would have been impossible. Together, we can achieve far more. Lyra nodded, her eyes bright. Yes, this is what humans do. We endure, we learn, and we use knowledge to improve life. Their success was short-lived. From the shadows of the chamber, the faint sound of machinery movement alerted them. More scavenger drones had arrived, likely drawn by the activation of the new device. This time, there were more of them and they moved faster, coordinated in a way that suggested semi-intelligent programming. Joran clenched his fists, thinking quickly. We survive not by strength but by intelligence. Let's use the facility itself to our advantage. They ran back through the tunnels, luring the drones toward sections with old, partially collapsed machinery. Joran instructed Lyra to use cables and panels to redirect and trap the drones. Reflective surfaces from the atmospheric regulator reflected sunlight and artificial light, confusing the sensors. Slowly, methodically, they managed to immobilize the drones, one by one. Humans survive, Joran said, panting slightly, because we can think faster than machines. Lyra smiled. And because we cooperate. Alone, either of us would have struggled. Together, we adapt, we overcome, we succeed. Once the drones were disabled, they took a moment to catch their breath. Outside, the twin suns were setting, casting long shadows over the hills. The facility, once hidden and dormant, now hummed with power, ready to be explored and used to enhance human survival. Joran and Lyra returned to the barn with more devices and notes. The fire was warm, and the barn seemed less isolated than ever. For the first time in years, Joran felt a sense of shared purpose, a recognition that humans were at their best when combining intelligence, resourcefulness, and cooperation. As night fell, they reviewed their discoveries. Lyra spoke first. This facility, its technology, and the storm's revelation prove one thing. Humans endure because we are clever, adaptable, and persistent. Challenges test us, but we learn from them and improve. Joran nodded. Exactly. We face storms, creatures, and old machines, but our strength is our mind, our curiosity, and our ability to work together. Alone, we survive. Together, we thrive. The barn was quiet, the fire crackling softly. Outside, the stars of Alurin 7 twinkled across the sky. Inside, two humans, strangers just days before, sat together, planning, learning, and dreaming of what they could accomplish. They understood that the planet was harsh, unpredictable, and full of dangers, but also full of possibilities. The world is harsh, Joran said, but humans are harsher in our resolve. We survive, we adapt, we overcome. That is what makes us remarkable. Lyra smiled. Yes, and we will continue to explore, to learn, and to thrive. Together, humans can endure anything. Days turned into weeks as they worked on the facility. They repaired machines, tested new energy systems, and adapted devices to meet their needs. They built small greenhouses powered by recovered energy cells, purified water from distant streams, and even developed simple communication devices using salvaged parts. Every success reinforced the truth that humans were clever, resourceful, and resilient. The facility became more than a discovery. It became a symbol of human potential. What had once been a storm-battered ruin was now a hub of ingenuity, proof that humans could survive and flourish on worlds that seemed impossible to conquer. Joran and Lyra explored further, uncovering hidden chambers and secret storage areas. Each discovery reminded them of the importance of intelligence, cooperation, and perseverance. They realized that humans thrived not because the world was easy, but because they could turn danger into opportunity and learn from every challenge. As the twin suns set behind the hills, casting long shadows across the barn and the newly repaired facility, Joran looked at Lyra. We survived storms, machines, and unknown technology, and we did it together. That is the essence of humanity. Lyra nodded. Yes, Humans endure because we adapt, because we learn, and because we work together. Alone, we survive. Together, we thrive. In that quiet barn with the hum of machines and the glow of firelight, two humans, once strangers, sat united. They had faced storms, dangers, and mysteries. They had relied on their intelligence, cooperation, and perseverance. And they had proven that humans, no matter how alone they may seem, were capable of enduring, thriving, and building a future even on a world as harsh as Alurin 7. The stars above twinkled like distant beacons, watching over a planet that would test them again and again. But Joran and Lyra were ready. Humans survived through intelligence, adaptability, and resilience, and now together they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The barn was quiet, but inside, two human minds worked in unison, planning, learning, and dreaming. And on that harsh, beautiful world, humanity had found its strength once again.